In the beginning, there was Rugby League, born of a revolution, a sport for the people. For a century, it flourished and faltered. Eventually, one club became dominant, while others struggled to survive. It was time for a change. So 100 years after Rugby League was born, came its revolution. And 2 decades on, the sport has evolved into a spectacle for our times. There's not much that gets the Rugby League fan worked up. Well, referees, of course, sometimes. But on the whole, they're a pretty positive bunch. But something happened 20 years ago that sparked some pretty lively debate. The Super League revolution had come. £87 million from Sky Sports for broadcasting rights. But some clubs would have to merge if they wanted a share. It wasn't popular.
With Oldham, their Salford, Manchester never.
There's no identity. I mean, that's what you're taking away from people.
The new structure will begin on the 28th of March 1996.
Maurice Lindsay, at that time the chief executive of the Rugby Football League and one of the architects of the new Rugby League, became enemy number one.
It was doomed from the start. The chairman shut their eyes and said 3 Hail Marys and said, we'll vote for this. But of course it gave us enormous debates in the House of Commons, petitions from some of the clubs who were going to be considered for merger, cries to hang Lindsay from the lamppost and burn an effigy. And so it was a big drama for about a year.
Some clubs were in favour. Certainly when there's a substantial cheque placed on the table, it causes people to focus very clearly on what the future is. And certainly some clubs were more advanced in their discussions than others. But very quickly that unravelled. I think that most infamously, you know, the proposed club for the Wakefield region, Wakefield, Castleford and Featherstone, which had been branded Cold Air, was the source of much anxiety amongst people. And I think that the whole concept of trying to create super clubs from within clubs fell foul of public support, really. I think they didn't support that, and the club chairman really backtracked pretty quickly.
Mergers were abandoned, but plans for a Super League continued, a revolution necessary to save the sport. But it had survived for a century. Why change it now?
Rugby League was completely broke. It was financially on its uppers, and we were playing for peanuts in the television world. We would never produce the great players. We would never entice the Jonathan Davises and all the rest of them to come to our sport because we just didn't have the funds to do it.
And so, for the 8th time in his lifetime, Shaun Edwards collects the winning medal.
We were full-time, winning all the trophies, and Wigan winning every year were no good for anybody, but for Wigan fans, of course. But we had the internationals, you know, playing in the reserves. We was there winning everything against part-timers.
For the other clubs to exist, they needed to be on a level playing field. They needed to be getting the same money, and they needed to have the interest from the fans. And I think that the Super League, although some people might disagree about the way that how it went about and how it was caused, and maybe it was a bit crude, but it was about the money, and the injection of money was what helped the game to progress into the professional state that it's in now.
Time for change. The broadcasting rights money could make that happen. The club chairman voted unanimously yes. 2 decades later, they're together again for a lunch to remember that historic time.
It was a difficult time, it was an exciting time, and you look back on it now and you like to see where the game is now and hope that things are a lot better than they were, and I think they are.
I remember Maurice coming back and talking about what he'd achieved with Sky and what the Super League vision was, and wow, was it exciting. You know, and it was about putting Rugby League on the map, it was about big city teams, it was about new stadiums, and we can all look back and see how much of that has actually been delivered, but at the time that vision was phenomenal.
Looking back on those days, do you look back with fondness of being part of a historic move in the sport?
Oh, I do. I always look. When you're part of a historic move in anything, you're very proud of it, aren't you? And enjoyed playing a part in some way.
So the 3 big headlines from the creation of Super League.
All of the players involved in the inaugural competition would go full-time, the sport would switch to summer, and there'd be a brand new club, Paris.
So no surprises where the first game would be.
It's been on telly all week. Yeah.
Back then, Gary Hetherington was the chief executive of Sheffield Eagles, Paris Saint-Germain's opposition for that very first game.
For Paris to be playing Sheffield in the opening game represented something new for Rugby League, something very new. You know, Sheffield was still a new club, made its way and won its way into the to the Super League. Paris, very new entity, of course, to play its first game. So this represented the big, bright future for Rugby League. And so I think, yes, it was the ideal fixture. I know a lot of people travelled from Sheffield, nearly 2,000 people travelled from Sheffield, which was a huge travelling following for the Eagles. And it was such a terrific event.
I know there are two different lenses.
Sky were very helpful. They had a dream as well. They wanted as many cities as possible to be playing each other, because you can sell cities to Europe. And the idea of Paris representing France and opening up a game with Sheffield, which again is a city, was tremendous. It was new, it was powerful, and it grabbed the imagination of everybody over in France.
Hi boss, how are you?
All right. The opening game, I was panicking because I was there, and good heavens, I think with 20 minutes to go there were about 4,000 people in the stadium. Had to do a live broadcast back to Look North West, and had nobody behind me, and they were saying at sort of 6:40 p.m. in England, well, you've got no spectators, Morris. I said, oh, I think they're coming. I was praying at the same time. Whoosh! The last 15 minutes, we had 17,000 people come through the gates.
It was a night of many firsts. Mascots became part of the entertainment, as well as cheerleaders.
Centres, Frederick Banquet and Linton Stark.
And players now wore squad numbers that they keep all season, regardless of the position they were playing.
We turned up in the morning at the Charlotte Stadium, looking around the ground, and noticed one thing in particular: there were no dead ball lines. And on approaching the groundsman and getting somebody to translate that we needed some dead ball lines put on, he actually asked us, do we actually need them? Is it important to have them? So it was that sort of thing all day.
And the European Super League is underway. Is Banquet, and Banquet to the corner.
It was also a first for the video referee. And look at the size of that square in the air.
Referee calls for the screen. He wants to have a look at the replay before making the decision.
It's like everything else, you know, you've got your protocols. You have to draw a square in the air, make sure it's big enough for the video referee to see it, because we didn't know what the communication was, whether the video referee would be hearing us or not. And so you do the square. I actually did it twice on that day. And like everything else, you go to review things and you look at it and think, well, I look pretty stupid then.
It has been the #1 talking point since day one, since Stuart Cummings asked for the first decision in Paris. None of us knew what was going to happen. I didn't have a clue, really, because I said, I think in the commentary, and Stuart Cummings will now look at the screen. And of course, there was another video referee in the bowels of the stadium somewhere who was checking out what was going on. It wasn't a match referee.
10-metre scrum, no try. I think the picture showed that Banquet lost the ball.
I think it's been the greatest innovation that other sports have tried to follow it, but none of them have done it as well as we have.
Coming up to 10 minutes of this match gone, half an hour.
Banquet got a yes for his next effort.
Banquet for the corner, try! The first Super League try.
We came back home on the plane that night, and we honestly thought, with 17,000 plus in Paris, that what Maurice Lindsay had been talking about, Milan, Barcelona, all the major capitals of Europe, was going to happen. And where did we go the next night? We went to Oldham to see Oldham against Wigan. And it wasn't quite the same, let me put it that way. It wasn't quite the same. But when we came back on that plane, we weren't exactly drinking champagne because we had a busy weekend ahead of us, but we were high. We thought this is the start of something big. And it has been the start of something big, but not around the capital cities and the major cities of Europe that we'd all been promised.
What has been big is Rugby League's attitude to innovation. Technology has increasingly been a part of the sport.
I always look at any aspect of technology as being good. We started the first technology that came really into the game with, wearing a microphone during play. And the first thing this did was make you stop and think about what you were actually saying on the field. That in itself led you to look at certain statements that you would use actually starting to prepare for the game, which in the early 90s was fairly novel, you know, thinking about what you're actually going to say to players when something arises. Moving on from that, the next thing I recall being a major step forward was the introduction of a big screen in the ground and live replays going on the screen. You know, at first you think this is quite a threatening thing, but actually I preferred refereeing with a big screen in the ground because 95% of the people making a judgment on the decision I was making didn't really have a good view of what was happening. By seeing the replay on the big screen, they actually, you know, could see that the decision was hopefully correct, and so that takes the pressure off the referee in the middle. So I think that's been a positive for certainly for match officials.
You're blocking in the line. It's absolutely ball.
And now the ref cam that's coming into play, we get some great shots for TV, but the actual ability of referees to learn from that is so valuable. Because a lot of the training footage that we'll use is the sort of high camera from the gantry at the side, which is at right angles to the view the referee usually has. We can now offer up-and-coming referees the actual view that a referee's got in normal game time, and they learn so much from that. So these new technologies are really useful for referees and are being used in the right way as well.
So from March in Paris through the long summer months, Super League had its first season in the sun. By August, it had produced its first champion team, and it wasn't Wigan.
Fogarty! That is the icing on this cake.
We said when we won one trophy, we will win them all, and we're going for the Premiership next week.
Very elated. I mean, these guys have lifted so much for today and, you know, all year, and it's a measure of consistency throughout the year. Everybody's pulled together. We've had our hard times, we've had our good times, and today's certainly one of the best.
St Helens top the league and win the first Super League title with a victory over a Warrington team featuring a man who would soon become a Saints legend.
It was nice to see somebody, you know, be successful other than Wigan. You know, we'd had that 10 years of Wigan dominance. As I said, being the only full-time team in rugby league. So St Helens, you know, they had a spectacular team, and you know that was the team that I wanted to be part of, you know, in years to come. And yeah, unfortunately, I was on the whipping end of a 60-odd point drubbing in the last, because obviously there wasn't the playoff system then as well. It was first past the post like the old championship. And yeah, Saints give us a good ride at Knowsley Road that night.
They were a great team at the time. You know, Bobby was at his best. You know, obviously Steve Prescott was there. We had some great battles with him at fullback. But they were the entertainers, Saints, at that time. I loved to watch them, and I loved to play in them games. But to see them win that was a pretty painful one for us to take.
The emergence of the full-time era was beginning to level the playing field, but what effect has it had on the sport over 2 decades and those who play it?
Professionalism has gone through the roof. I remember, you know, when I started playing, it was very much there was a big drinking culture around the sport. We'd train on Thursday night, then we'd go for a few pints, and then as soon as the game was finished on a Sunday, it'd be down to the pub. And Super League didn't change that overnight. There was still you know, a drinking culture attached to the sport, but as the years went on, teams tried to improve. A lot of the ideas come from Australia, a lot of the sports science. And if you look at the shape of your average rugby player back in the 80s, it was a lot different to the average shape of a player now. So yeah, I think the professionalism is right up there now with other sports.
When I started, we were only probably training twice a week. Games were more or less every Sunday, so it'd be Tuesday, Thursday training, Saturday team run and play on the weekend. You know, now these guys they're in at 7 o'clock in the morning and going home at 4. So much work's got into them on the training field, in the gym, in the recovery room, in the treatment room, you know, in the video room. It's just a different level that you can't. It's hard to compare what a player was when I first started to a player where they're at now.
And perhaps the man who epitomises the improving standards of players in the Super League era is twice Man of Steel, former Great Britain captain, and the face of the advertising campaign for a famous male grooming product, Paul Sculthorpe.
It'd have happened for me anyway, even being in the era before Super League, because that was my mentality as a player anyway. You know, to be the best that I can be and work as hard as I can to succeed and be successful. But Super League certainly aided that, to be able to, you know, to train full time, you know, train in the day rather than either going from work like some players did or from college or whatever. You know, training at night for a couple of hours a week, and then maybe on a Saturday morning. It just allowed you to grow and to improve so much as a player. You know, to get the opportunity to, you know, to do weight sessions 3 or 4 times a week. How much that, you know, improved everybody's game and everybody's stature and strength as well.
Faster, fitter and fonder of a frappuccino than a fag and a pint, the Rugby League professional players come a long way since the days of mud and mayhem. The era of Super League has brought much more with it than just the weather.
Blue shoes.
Blue shoes.
Red ball.
Red ball.
Green rabbit.
Green rabbit. Blue shoes, red ball.
Let's just focus. Blue beetle.
Blue beetle.
Orange key.
Orange key.
You got it?
Yeah, got it. Situation update. 39-year-old male. Significant blood loss. Respiratory rate 20. BP 80. Over 60.
Listening is a key skill that will set you up for your future career. Learn more with Barclays Life Skills.
Take off for New York with Expedia. At Expedia, you can book your flight, hotel, car hire and activities all in one place. Atoll Protected.
At LV, our car insurance comes from the heart. That's why we've made our new multi-car policy our cheapest way to get cover for your household when you switch to LV. So, just imagine if you insured 2, 3 or more cars with us, how much you could save. And to get an exclusive multi-car discount from the Which Insurance Provider of the Year, go direct to lv.com.
Welcome to E-Class, where we will be cruising at an altitude of 6 free months of Apple Music. Just our way of showing you the love.
Can I get free Apple Music too?
Of course, Duncan. And when you stream or download all those banging tunes, the data's on us.
RAC fix 4 out of 5 cars at the roadside on average in just 30 minutes. Get cover for just $34.99 at rac.co.uk.
We have your favorite magazines for only $7.99 a month. It's in your pocket. Readly. Try 2 weeks for free.
There's a local hero for that.
Whatever the job.
There's a local hero for that.
Find a trusted tradesperson at localheroes.com. A local service with easy online booking and a 12-month British Gas guarantee. Search Local Heroes.
House. World said kids. I said Route 66. TV said get famous. Lottery said get lucky. I said get your hands dirty. She said this, he said that. I say Arona. The new Seat Arona. Do your thing.
This February, Sky Sports brings you all the drama, action and excitement from the best in the world.
Talk about the man for the occasion. Oh, into the crowd in the top tier.
Magnificent game of cricket. That is special. That is really special.
She's not going to score another one. Oh, yes, she is.
Feel it all this February on Sky Sports.
Super League and summer go together like a pie and a pint, but it wasn't always sunshine and smiles. For 100 years, Rugby League was a winter sport at every level. It played havoc with the fixture lists, and it was a turn-off at the turnstiles.
And it's Neil Summers who's going to take the conversion attempt, I think.
I remember playing at odds on a Thursday night in an A-team fixture, and it was one of those games where I'm stood on the back line and I'm looking at the halfway for the kickoff, and I can't see the ball, and I'm saying to the guy that was catching the ball for me, I'm saying, you're going to have to let me know when you've got it in your hands, because I can't see it that far, and that's what Odsal was like.
When your ankles are covered in mud and you can't feel your fingers or your toes, it was quite a strange time, and I think it was one of those things where, as a very young man, I wanted to play on the top of the ground, I wanted to be part of a running game, and I wanted to be able to feel my hands, and I also wanted to go and sit in some showers that worked, and I also wanted to go to clubs and not get chilblains because the water wasn't hot enough, and there was lots of things in rugby league at that time that needed to be changed.
One of the school teachers in Wigan said, "Maurice, please go to summer." He said, "I'm sick and fed up of coaching in February with a 12-year-old kid on the wing with his sleeves over his hands because he's freezing, wants to go home to his mother." He said, "They'll never make it. Change to summer and I promise you we'll make it."
The faster grounds and the sun, the standard, it certainly increased. There's a lot more exciting rugby being played. But it's only really now when I think about how bad it was, you know, the conditions now where they get called off. There was no such thing about games being called off back then.
There were worries that supporters would abandon rugby league for other summertime pursuits. But now more people are watching the sport at the top level.
We disturbed viewing habits, we disturbed spectators' habits. You know, people who used to kind of go every Sunday and stand in the fresh air, then were changed, and holiday plans had to change. There was a number of disturbances to people's habits. But I think the history has demonstrated it was whilst a brave move in a sport that is renowned for its innovation, it nevertheless was exactly the right thing to do.
Back in 2000, the Super League total attendance was 1,246,000. In 2015, it was 1,650,000, down from its 2012 peak, but up on the 2014 figure. And of course, last year's grand final was a complete sellout, which brings us on to another step in the Super League revolution.
And Bradford Bulls are champions of '97.
When Bradford Bulls lifted the Super League trophy in 1997, it was the last time a team would be crowned champions for winning most league points. The following year, the Super League champions would be decided after playoffs and a grand final.
I think there'd always been a discussion about how you finish the league season. I mean, there's always been an appetite to have a big finale and the biggest game and a crowning of the best team. And it was a way of galvanising this concept that at the end of the season you want the biggest game with the best two teams lifting the biggest prize.
It was logical, it was sensible, it created an outcome, it created an excitement for both players and especially for fans, and of course for the TV audience as well.
Old Trafford was to be the venue for the big finale, played under the floodlights of an October evening.
And I was a bit scared, but we went. And I remember standing with one of the journalists at the top of the row box, just looking down, and there were about 18,000 people in Old Trafford. And I thought, oh God, we're going to get slaughtered. And again, they came late. And we had 40,000 people for that very first final. That was a tremendous success.
What were your thoughts at that time when they said, right, it's not going to be first past the post, it's going to be a grand final?
A bit disappointed at first, because I do believe who finishes the league on top, you know, that has to carry great strength. I think you know, you play all year and you want to finish on top of the league, and you should be rewarded for that. But when the hype came and you know, the prize was the Super League and the playoff structure was explained to everybody, it certainly captured the imagination, and the crowds were massive back then, and I was excited, and to play in the first one at Old Trafford, which was a memorable night, it kind of made me realise that it was the right decision to go down and play for it.
It was going into the unknown. I loved the build-up, but even the journalists didn't know what to make of it, and the rugby league community as a whole didn't know how it would take off. Thankfully now that's the highlight of the rugby league calendar now, and quite rightly so. But yeah, to go into the build-up was great, and to, you know, any chance you get the chance to play at Old Trafford is a pretty special moment.
It's going to be Wigan who will get the grand final underway. Off we go!
I was in the naughty corner of the first grand final. I'd been suspended a couple of times that year, and Graham Murray didn't select me in the final, so I was in the dugout, sat with the players, and I think we were touching 40,000. You knew that once everybody bought into it being an established week, as we've moved on, we've got that October weekend, Saturday night. I remember thinking this could be really good, this could be really special.
Robinson, what a try! Billy Wears with a try under the sticks. Use of the elbow there by O'Connor, and Blackmore didn't like it.
More than all in.
My only doubt was that would we get the fans and would the fans buy into it? So to turn up there when it was Leeds against Wigan, rain pouring down, seeing all the fans that were there, it was absolutely fabulous. And from that encounter, I think all the fans really bought into it then, that yeah, this is what it's about. It's a summer game now. We're going to end at Old Trafford come the end of the year. And if that's what it's all about, we want more of it.
A memorable night of rugby league, a winning formula that was to stay, albeit with a few tweaks.
The league structure's changed many times over the last 2 decades, from 12 teams in a first-past-the-post competition to the playoffs and the grand final. Over time, it's changed as well, from 5 teams in the playoffs to 6 and then to 8. And now we have a Super 8s competition. Rugby League's never been afraid of change.
The Super 8s model works, particularly at Super League level, where over that period of time, you've got the best teams playing each other on a regular basis and counting down to that final 4. And it's sudden death, make or break, one game, and then you're into the grand final. So it keeps the grand final at Old Trafford as the pinnacle. It just makes the road very difficult to get there, which it should be, because that's what sport is about. It's about competition. And it also means that you've got to be consistent and competitive right from February through to October, and it rewards the teams that are the best and consistent over the season.
The top 8 concept last year, it was a first. We learnt a lot from it. Every other player and coach will have learnt as well. And so in year 2, I think it'll be that bit better, and in year 3 it'll be a bit better again. And you know, there's a recognition that every game does count, every result does count, because we're working towards that. We want to be as high up in the table as possible after round 23, and then of course we've got to be in the top 4 after round 30, otherwise our season's finished. So it's creating this sudden death nature to our competition, and the fact that the results are just so critical.
Yes, every minute matters as the season reaches its crescendo. But before then, every club gets its day in the sun. A whole weekend of rugby league under one roof. It's magic.
It was an exciting sort of event to be involved with as a player. It was sort of going into the unknown, how it was going to work. What changing rooms would you change in? Could you warm up before the game? You know, there was a big excitement about it from the players' perspective, and obviously there were always big games. You know, Bradford, Leeds, Wigan Saints. You know, now it's Wigan, Leeds. You know, so for me, I was always involved in massive games in the Magic Weekend. So yeah, it was a great concept, I think, and you know, very good for rugby league.
I remember backing Mickey Hyam up, got the ball and under the post, and then they had a bit of fun. The boys all piled on us, and because of the time, you know, they had a bit of fun, and that try, the memory will stay with me forever. That it was fantastic, and my little boy who likes his rugby league now was watching. He was so excited. It was nice. I think the Magic Weekends are great. The first one were down in Wales, and they've been up in at Murrayfield, and then Man City's ground, and now up in Newcastle. So I think it's great if we can introduce a new audience to rugby league, and it's a day out for all the the Super League fans as well. It's great for the players to play in these big arenas as well. Our calendar is a congested one, so we don't have many opportunities, if any, to actually put in another event. So there is an argument to say you would replace that extra league fixture, that extra Super League fixture, with a Nines tournament with the game's best players played in a great stadium in front of big crowds. I think it'd be a winner, and I think it is something we ought to that's worth considering.
There have been discussions along those lines. Certain clubs would look at that. It is an integral part of the league structure. You know, we've got a 30-game competition. You know, you play 23 rounds, before you split, and therefore you've got to be very careful not to tinker with that. We did say that that we'd have a period of stability now, for, you know, to evaluate whether the structure is just as it needs to be. So I can't see any immediate changes, but you would never say never.
This year, Magic Weekend is back at St James's Park in Newcastle, a Premier quality stadium for League's big away day, and very different to some of the old grounds which were once part of the sports culture. For many, the old crumbling stadia were their own theatres of dreams and dramas. It was at the Willows that Salford ended Wigan's hold on the Challenge Cup. It was at Wilderspool that fans saw Alfie Langas steal a ball and score behind the line.
Langas got it off it! 1-on-1!
And it was at Central Park they watched Martin Offiah speed his way into legend. Some old stadia still stand, but many have gone, consigned to memory. And the new grounds have tempted new fans through the turnstiles, all part of the original Super League dream.
I think it's a necessity, you know, when stadiums are crumbling and, you know, you can't fit the full squad into the changing rooms, you know, something's got to be done, you know, and that's the way it is, you know, new stadiums are built. You know, I'd love to see Odsal, you know, redeveloped in its own right to keep that sort of character, you know, as you do with an old house. You know, I think that'd be a great thing, but, you know, unfortunately some stadiums have to go, and, you know, others I believe can be developed, and I think Odsal's one of them.
Everyone wants to be in the best facility they can be to make the fans' experience as good as it can be, which should then translate to a healthy profit and loss account for money that they can invest in the squad, and it becomes a very virtuous circle. So I don't think the pressure needs to come from us anymore as much. I think it's just coming from the clubs themselves. How can we produce a stadium that gives the fans a better experience and keeps them coming back more often?
New stadia or big improvements on the old ones, it's all about bums on seats, literally.
But it's what people see inside these great arenas that keeps them coming back for more.
Do you remember that wonderful meal we had as we left Lanzarote?
Superb, it just has so much.
I had that delicious lobster.
And you also had that delicious steak. Remember those lovely morning walks as the sun rose over the Canaries?
And those lovely afternoon cocktails as the sun rose over the yard arm. What was after that?
Wales.
Wales?
No, Wales!
P&O Cruises.
This is the life.
We've been thinking about those moments when the less you have to worry about, the better. And then we thought, shouldn't we make sure our customers have less to worry about? Reassuring them that our secure app comes with Face ID login to help you feel safe sending money for the everyday,
my baby,
or even the big day. And we thought, yes, we should. So we did. NatWest, we are what we do.
Kona by Hyundai. You drive it, you define it. Visit hyundai.co.uk.
Marcus, you called Direct Line exactly 2 hours and 37 minutes ago. You've got an uncontrollable leak, and you've tried to stop it yourself. The bad news is that Joey here is going to have to remove your ball cock. Huh? The good news is that Joey's an emergency plumber, and that's covered under your Direct Line Home Plus insurance. I'll leave you two to it.
You are getting in shape, Bob.
You bet, Ted. And I've just got a loan from Likely Loans.
Likely Loans?
Yeah, they work hard to accept you, even if you've been turned away elsewhere, no matter what shape you're in.
Borrow up to £5,000 at 59.9% APR representative. You'll get an instant response and get your money the next working day. Apply now at likelyloans.com.
Once you begin to discover who you are, then you'll realize how you have been given authority over your life.
But you can only do that through the struggle of life. We've been chosen for this great work.
The 1517 to Paris in cinemas February 9th.
TSB believes that for too long the big five banks have taken their customers for granted. They think banks should profit with, not from, their customers. That's why their Plus account gives all their customers 3% interest on balances up to £1,500. Plus, anyone who breaks free and joins TSB can get £10 cash back a month as an initial thank you. Just one reason 1,000 people are joining TSB every day.
Choose and buy your perfect car with complete control. Visit carwow.com and see what you could save.
Get down! Here comes the ready or not. Here comes the boys from the south. Here comes the...
We've been shot at, drowned. My knickers are wet and I'm starving.
Strike Back continues with us Wednesday at 9, only on Sky One.
Here comes the...
And if you missed the previous episode, Strike Back's available now on Catch Up TV.
Can Liverpool avenge their 4-1 away defeat to Tottenham earlier in the season? Find out this weekend, live on Sky Sports Premier League.
"20 years from that first season and Super League continues to deliver breathtaking moments. Remember this from the beginning of March this year?
He's having a go, it's Sandow!
Chris Sandow's drop goal as the hooter sounded is one in a long line of nail-biting ends to top-level games. We've compiled 10 of the best moments from the last 20 years. The fifth grand final delivered a classic denouement. With the scores tied at 18-all, up stepped Sean Long for an unforgettable one-pointer.
This is the moment for Long! He's kicked it! Long has kicked the goal!
There's been some spectacular games, and that one was right up there. Again, just the way the game finished, and that man again, Sean Long. You know how many big plays has he come up with in big games to win.
It wasn't without controversy though. As the seconds ticked down, Chris Joynt seemed to fall to the ground unchallenged. If the referee deemed it a voluntary tackle, that could be a penalty to Bradford and a chance to take the game.
He was running between me and Lee Gilmore, and I saw him, losing his feet and his weight going down. I thought he's going to dive on the floor here, so I actually moved out the way just to let him, accentuate the fact that he just fell on the floor. And, he'd say he got back up and started moving again, but nobody around him. He didn't slip. What is a voluntary tackle, but it wasn't to be.
I always say he slipped. Going down for a voluntary tackle, and thankfully we got away with that. But it's just for me, we have got the best sport in the world. Entertainment value, the product on the field is second to none, and there's so many we can list them off. The amount of big games and exciting finishes on every year after year. We just keep pulling them out.
5 years later, Bulls' hearts would break again in an even more controversial end to a dramatic game against their old rivals Leeds, who were trailing when the referee awarded a disputed penalty.
It's a penalty! Offside against Justin Harris. Kevin Sinfield. Sinfield hits the ball! It's goes! There's more controversy here. The hoot is gone. Was the ball down or not? It was!
Steve Danson didn't decide to go to the video, which was very disappointing from their point of view and a Bradford point of view, and I still don't understand why a referee wouldn't go to the screen when it decided a game like that.
I remember the anger on the Bradford Bulls directors' faces at the final whistle when they realised that they'd been, in their eyes, cheated out of a huge result, because that's one of the days where the Leeds Rhinos Bradford Bulls rivalry was at its greatest. And of course the big stage was Cardiff for the Magic fixture. Bradford Bulls would be favourites on that day, and of course Leeds Rhinos won in the most dramatic fashion. And then when there was this realisation that, hey, they weren't entitled to win that because the player had run from an offside position, there was real anger in the eyes and the faces of those Bradford Bulls directors who wanted to confront anybody and everybody at the time. And that was an interesting moment, and one that will live with me forever.
We only have to go back to September last year for number 8 on our list. Leeds had already won the Challenge Cup. They needed to beat Huddersfield in the Super 8s to clinch the league leaders' title. But with a couple of minutes to go, they were trailing, and it looked like Wigan might win the Shield. Then this.
Ryan Hall! Ryan Hall! Ryan Hall scores for Leeds and wins them the league leaders' Shield.
For that to occur with the last play of a season, with so much at stake, it was just absolutely remarkable. Great for the sport. It wasn't particularly good for Huddersfield on the day, of course, or indeed for Wigan. But for the sport, and especially for Leeds Rhinos, that was just something special. That was a fairy tale. It was one of those unique moments in sport that people who were there and seen it will remember forever. I didn't see it coming, so it came as a surprise to me, but a pleasant surprise. And I think if I had to pick one moment out from the past 20 years, that's the sight of Ryan Hall running and not going to get caught was the one that will stay with me forever.
They went on to win the grand final too, making Leeds Rhinos the masters of 2 decades of Super League. 7 times champions, 9 grand final appearances altogether, the success story of the era.
We're one of the few clubs that's got the benefit of a city, and a major city, and a city that's got a really proud history and a heritage of rugby league. We've got a terrific facility here at Headingley. I think stability in what we do. We've got the same board of directors pretty much that we had 20 years ago. And then ultimately a production of players that are managed by very competent, dedicated coaching staff who all work well together, that are constantly looking towards the future.
While Leeds have flourished, some clubs have fallen by the wayside. Paris and Workington soon dropped from Super League. Gateshead and Sheffield came and went, consumed in mergers with Hull FC and Huddersfield. Expansionist efforts in London and in Wales with the Crusaders have so far failed to reach the heights expected. And Bradford, once the kings of Super League, and the ones everyone else had to follow, have been in decline.
Yeah, it's sad, you know, the history that the club's got, especially in the Super League era. You know, one of the front runners in that concept, for him not to be in Super League at the minute is, you know, it's sad, and hopefully they'll get back in there and they'll be back as a force in Super League. But you know, these things happen in life, don't they? And throughout any sport, you know, clubs have had the down times and the bad times, and you know, I think they're back on the up now. Bradford, they're a solid group. I went over last week to watch them play Leo. I got invited over, and you know, it's getting back what it had.
But other clubs have risen. Catalan Dragons, a success story over the last decade. In fact, their first ever game in 2006 was one of the most memorable, a win over the famous Wigan Warriors.
Here is Dennis Moran again. Oh, great piece of skill, wonderful skill from CSC. Here is Alex Cham. Great hands. They are in for the high mark.
Wine will flow, it's Theo Hall.
Catalan Dragons have won a famous victory.
It was to be a nightmare season for Wigan. The team that had been at the very top 10 years earlier were now staring down the barrel of relegation, an indicator of the changing fortunes the new competition had wrought. It took a return from retirement of one of their biggest stars to save them. Ironically, the turnaround beginning with a win over the Dragons.
I'd retired and I knew what was missing from the team. The team was lacking in confidence, and it was probably lacking a few voices, and I had some chats with Brian, and I'll come back, but as a player I'm not going to give you anything, you know. have too much respect for the game to think that I can come back and have a difference on the field. But as a voice, I'll put my hand up and I'll speak and I'll say what needs to be said, and that's all I did for 6 games. I came in and we got a bit of momentum together, and you know, we managed to stay up that year. And it's crazy for me to think that Wigan were ever in that position, you know, to be fighting relegation. But you know, I kind of cringe at the thought of people saying it was a saviour. It wasn't as dramatic as that. It was more, I was asked could I do a role, and I came in and do a role, but it was the other players who eventually stood up and got the survival.
Wigan's safe, the relegation dogfight ended up being between Castleford and Wakefield. The Wildcats' ground was packed, their highest crowd in 31 years. Castleford had been favourites to avoid the drop, but the Wildcats nailed the win in the sudden death thriller.
High kick again from Jeffries, the ball has bounced! It's a try for James Evans! It's celebration time for James Evans, because Wakefield are going to survive! Castleford are on their way down!
Castleford's loss was Hull Kingston Rovers' gain, finally earning their place in Super League. And of course that meant the return of one of the most anticipated fixtures in the Rugby League calendar, the Hull Derby.
It's Paul King, and Hull look like they're going to win the first meeting in Super League against their local rivals.
Dommick seals the win in a thriller. Teammate Dowes gets an uppercut, but smiles all round for the black and whites this time. Hull FC have had some success in the Super League era, one of only 2 teams outside the so-called Big Four to make it to a grand final.
Leeds, Bradford, Wigan and St Helens have been the 4 teams that have obviously won it, but Hull FC have been involved in it, Warrington have been involved in it, and I think it's only a matter of time. I'd love to see, you know, at least one new finalist, and I'd like to see a new name on the cup. It might not be this year and it might not be next year, but I'd like to think it's on its way soon.
I hope it changes. You know, it's these teams keep competing. You know, I'd like to think there'll be more than 4. Huddersfield have really stepped up the game. You know, they've been right there at the end in the semis and the league leaders. When I look at the team that Catalan have got on paper, I think come the end of the year they're going to be a force. And Hull are making some serious noises now, so there are some contenders to break into that group.
Of all the teams who flourished in the early years of Super League, Bradford were the high flyers. They knew how to put on a party at their Odsal ground, and they had some of the biggest characters in the game. Who could forget the marauding performance by the reigning champions in the first game of 2004? The man machine Leslie Vanicolo running in 5 tries against Wigan.
Oh, fantastic player, great bloke as well, great bloke to be around. He was fantastic for the club at the time, and you know, very marketable player with his long locks and his coloured hairs, and you know, he'd come up with a different hairstyle each week, and you know, the fans at Bradford absolutely adored him. You know, one, because he could score tries for fun, he was great to watch, but also his character, you know, the way he celebrated.
And another import who made a short but memorable appearance in Super League, one of the Australian immortals, Andrew Johns.
Johns, oh brilliant! What a run, what a pass!
He played only 3 games for the Wolves, but his first was described as a masterclass.
Johns, he's kicked it! A genius! We are watching a genius tonight!
Andrew, who writes your scripts?
Yeah, I don't know. I had great work that. So much hard work went into it, and every player out there was so brave, and I've got to thank the Warrington club and the people. They've welcomed me with open arms, and you know, I felt like I had a repay home tonight.
Leeds on the losing side, but their time was to come. Number 2 on our list, the 2009 Grand Final. Leeds faced St Helens with their eye on the three-peat.
Champions 2007, champions 2008, champions 2009.
Lewis spoke about that, about the Lakers. I think the Lakers in basketball did that, and it's called a three-peat, is it, in America, and he talked about that. And he said, if you do that, you've got a dynasty, which is true, really. I think, especially with the side winning it in 04, and then to come back and win it in 7, 8 and 9. To win it 3 years in a row, I think it's incredible.
Leeds set the bar with that feat. Last year, they raised it by winning all the main honours. A remarkable rise to the top. But what lies ahead for them and for Super League over the next 20 years?
What do we want it to look like is the starting point. What is it capable of looking like is probably the second question. So I think that's very much down to the game, to our administrators, but indeed the responsibility really does rest with our clubs. Our clubs have got to say, what do we as a club want to look like? Where can we aspire to get to? What can we deliver, not only for ourselves, but for the wider game? And if there was that type of collective thinking and visionary approach, then I think we can achieve a great deal.
I think it will continue on. I don't think it's coming to an end anytime soon. I think the people at Red Hall and at Salford are too savvy for that. And they will always continue to innovate, and they'll always come up with new ideas. And, you know, I can see Old Trafford being filled for many, many more years to come for the grand final, which is now the biggest night of the year by far.
I think we're in a really good place. I think facilities are in a really strong place. I think the standard of play is really high. I think the viability of clubs is stronger than it's ever been. I think we've got more better managed clubs than we've ever had. But we should never underestimate the fact that there's still work to do there. I think we have to work on our international competitiveness. We have to make sure that that we close the gap with the club competition in the Southern Hemisphere. But I think there's a lot of good work going on by a number of people, and I'm very excited about the future for the competition.
The sport's come a long way since its revolution in 1996, and for all its struggles, it's survived and evolved, giving us games we'll remember for a long time to come. And perhaps this is the moment we'll all remember most. Back in 2000, St Helens and Bradford, two of the giants of Super League, met in the playoffs. As the last seconds ticked away, Bradford were leading by 11 points to 10.
West is tackled by Baikona and over the line. That's the match. That's going to be the match for Bradford.
He's given a penalty.
Oh, he has.
In cold hell there. They still are not out of it. Oh, they've taken a short one. They know that they've only got 10 seconds. Will they get this play the ball in? They're holding him down.
Sculthorpe wants to get on with it. Bradford counting down.
Kick and chase now.
This is the last play. Long kicks it wide to Iro. Iro to Hall. Hall is trapped. Back it goes to Hoppy. Over the shoulder to Hall. There is Yonkers. Here is Long. And Long fancies it. Long fancies it. It's wide to West. It's wide to West. Dwayne West inside to Joint. 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 Oh! Oh! Fantastic! They've won it! They've won it!
A try that summed up the excitement that Super League at its very best can deliver.
I think it did, and it's something we've always used at Saints, something I still use now. You know, if you talk to people, it's about never giving in. And one thing we'd never accept at Saints, I mean, we did it numerous times, was win games in the last few minutes, so was never accept defeat.
That's the match. That's going to be the match for Bradford.
The commentary just sums it up, because I'm ready. I know it as clear as anything. You know, saying the game's over with 10 seconds to go, and you know, we thought different.
Did you play a part in the move?
I actually started the move, Angela. Yeah, I actually played the ball, so I always say I never get the credit due. If I'd have knocked on, that would have never happened.
Perfect play the ball aside, it's the iconic commentary that stood the test of time.
I'm very proud of that, actually. I mean, when it happened, I didn't realise, obviously, when it all unfolded in front of me. I put the crib sheet down and I just spoke from the heart and watched what unfolded.
Hall is trapped. Back it goes to Hoppy.
I'm flattered that people think it is the Kenneth Wolstenholme moment for rugby league, because they think when Saints left Knowsley Road there was a book published, and whoever wrote the article said that was my they think it's all over, it is now moment. And as people have told you, I'm sure, it's on the wall at Langtree Park, it's been on T-shirts, there's been a choir have sung it. Unbelievable. It is unbelievable, and it was an unbelievable moment. I mean, that is without doubt, over the past 30 years that I've worked in this game with Sky, that is the moment that I will cherish until my dying day. I'll never ever forget that moment. And it just happened. It just evolved in front of us, you know. Long fancies it.
And Long fancies it. Long fancies it. It's wide to West.
It's wide to West. And Dwayne West never played another playoff match after that, and never played a playoff match before that. And that was his moment as well.
It's wide to West. Dwayne West inside to Joint.
And it was scored by Joint. Why it's called the wide to West try, I don't know. Probably because I said it's wide to West. It's wide to West. But it was Chris Joint's try. Poor old Matthew Elliott sank down in the stands. The chair had flipped back and he ended up on the floor. And he was absolutely crestfallen.
It is unbelievable here. It is frankly unbelievable.
And then Sean Long goes to take the conversion with St Bernard's head on. But what a moment. I mean, I'm shivering now even thinking about it. I really am. I still get the tingle up the back of my neck just thinking about that one moment. The best ever.
What a try! What a match! What drama!
Standout moment in 20 years of breathtaking sport. Here's to the next 2 decades. Cheers.
Enjoy Sky Sports Live. On all screens, on the go, and the best bits on demand.
At Expedia, you can book your flight, hotel, car hire and activities all in one place. Atoll protected.
What if you could work out at that gym near home? Or that one near work? Or that other one near work? That one round the corner from your other halves? Or when you're out on business? What if you were always near a gym and could pay per workout or get unlimited access to the gyms that fit around your life? No contracts, no joining fees, all from a couple of taps of your phone. Pay as your gym. Flexible fitness. Visit payasyourgym.com to get started.
Midlife Crisis said sports car. Kids said MPV. I said not my style. The boss said coupe. The dog said SUV. I said why not both? She said this, he said that. I say Arona. The new Seat Arona. Do your thing.
Introducing the Hi-View Smart Indoor Camera. Live stream to your phone in HD with motion, sound and person detection. Search Hive to discover more.
When an accident happens, time stops and you question everything.
What happened? Will I lose my job? Who's going to lend the money?
Injury Lawyers for You can't stop an accident happening, but we will help you get the compensation you deserve with our no-win, no-fee promise. So, if you've had an accident that wasn't your fault, what happens next? Injury Lawyers for You.
The Simba mattress. Built to survive the most rigorous testing. Responsive memory foam. Up to 2,500 springs. Breathable sleep surface. Because you do more in bed than just sleep. Enjoy a 100-night trial.
For monstrously great value, switch to Sky's totally unlimited broadband for just £18 a month for 12 months, including line rental. Plus, switching is easy with Sky's dedicated Switch Squad, as they speak to your current provider for you. So for great value, get Sky Broadband Unlimited for just £18 a month, and that includes line rental. Exclusively for new and existing Sky TV customers. Search Sky Broadband.
This war will rage for generations.
Sounds scary, doesn't it? This is our time. We're here to win a war.
Romans bring only chaos and destruction. Great. You don't defeat these people by fighting their warriors. It's their god you've got to kill.
Available to buy and keep in Sky Store now.
We should own the world. What do you want? I just have some questions.
Watch it straight from the cinema.
We're being hunted. Where is he? He's constructing an army. We have to stop him. What's the plan?
Choose Blade Runner 2049 on digital and add the DVD or Blu-ray. Buy and keep from $9.99 in Sky Store now.
This program contains flashing images.
The following program contains strobe lighting effects.
look at these temperatures, this is what you expect by day at this time of the year. A very mild night as we go into Thursday. But Thursday is going to be a transition day. We've got not one but two fronts working their way across the UK. The first one in the morning will bring some patchy rain through parts of northern England, perhaps East Anglia and southeast England. That will soon clear, and behind it we'll see some sunshine for a time. But look, more rain arriving into southwest England, Wales, Northern Ireland, western Scotland through the day, eventually pushing its way up into the Midlands and northwest England. Ahead of this, we've still got some warmth across East Anglia, southeast England, 21 or 22 Celsius here. Starting to see something cooler further west, and then some very turbulent weather potentially on Friday. A deep area of low pressure, tightly packed isobars, so gales and some heavy rain. We've got multiple warnings in place at the moment. That will be pushing its way across the UK, bringing heavy rain into western Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales and southwest England. Behind it, some spells of sunshine, but still very windy for Northern Ireland through the afternoon. That rain may not get across to the far southeast of England until later in the day, but it will be a windy day. These are the average sustained winds, but the gusts could well get up to 50 or 60 miles an hour, maybe even higher. So potentially some disruptive winds. Keep an eye on the warnings. There are lots of them, and they're all on our website. Bye-bye.
Suicide rates in the West are largely falling, but in the US they've risen by nearly a third in less than 20 years. One particular group is causing this spike. Our World, What's Killing America's White Men. Saturday and Sunday, 9:30 p.m. on the BBC News Channel.
When the weather can't decide what to do, you still can. To know what's coming, check the BBC Weather app.
Follow the story, whatever you're doing, wherever you are. You can follow every moment in depth with BBC News. Get the full story at bbc.co.uk/news. Get the headlines as they happen with the breaking news alert. And keep up with events by watching the BBC News channel in the app. Follow the story wherever you are with BBC News.
I'm Kasia Madeira with BBC World News. Our top stories. Donald Trump has accepted the resignation of his ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley. She resigned from her UN post earlier on Tuesday, fueling speculation that she has presidential ambitions. But in her resignation letter to the president, she said she'd support his re-election bid. Residents on the coast of Florida have been warned that Hurricane Michael could bring a storm surge of up to 3.5 meters when it makes landfall on Wednesday. Thousands of people have been told to leave what officials are calling the monster storm. And this video is trending on bbc.com. It's of a baby whale being rescued off the coast of Queensland. Rescuers spent almost 2 hours trying to untangle the calf from shark nets as two adult whales, one believed to be the calf's mother, stayed nearby. That's it from me. Stay with us here on BBC News. Our top story here in the UK, the Brexit Secretary Dominic Raab says that the government is closing in on a workable solution in the search for an agreement for Britain to withdraw from the EU, and a deal could be struck soon. Now let's go to Singapore for the latest business news.
A second warning from the International Monetary Fund in 24 hours, this time on the health of the global financial system. I'm Karishma Vaswani, bringing you the latest from the IMF and World Bank's annual summit here in Bali.
And survivors of the Sulawesi earthquake and tsunami are returning to work as a way to put the horror of the disaster behind them. Hello and welcome to Asia Business Report. I'm Sharanjeet Lail. Now, two warnings in 24 hours from the International Monetary Fund. This morning, the international lender says risks could rise sharply if trade tensions escalate or pressures in emerging markets were to worsen. That's from the latest Global Financial Stability Report. And to help break it down, our Asia Business correspondent Karishma Vaswani joins us now from the meeting venue over there in Bali. Karishma, what's the details of this report?
Good morning, Sharon. Well, the report's just been released in the last 30 minutes or so, and as you were saying, really highlighting the fact that risks have increased, although there's been strong expansion. The IMF says there's no reason to be complacent. In fact, there is a danger of some countries being too confident and not having fixed some of the issues that they should have when times were good. Well, joining me to talk about this in greater detail is the BBC's economics editor, Kamal Ahmed. You've just come from that press briefing, Kamal. What did it seem to you was the main priority that the IMF was trying to raise in this report?
I think there's been a really big change in the tectonic plates economically for the globe, and that comes because America growth is very strong. So the Federal Reserve is raising interest rates. That means that money is moving towards America as investors look for concerns. That leaves emerging market economies under a lot of pressure. Their currencies are under pressure. If they've got big debts denominated in dollars, that puts them under pressure. And there's a worry from the IMF that we are getting to a position where those capital flows start damaging emerging market economies as investors put all their money towards America.
Now, emerging market economies have already seen a large amount of money being pulled out of their markets. The IMF mentioned this in their report as well, right? Kamal, what's your sense from what they're saying? Is there a risk of spillover, that phrase that we always use, contagion effect?
Absolutely. So the worry is that there's very few things you can do to be a firebreak on these big capital flows. If the Federal Reserve, the American central bank, raises interest rates, that makes dollar assets more attractive, means that money moves towards them. And what can those governments in the emerging markets do? The IMF says they need to make sure they are controlling their debts, make sure they have good public finances, because they will become exposed as that quantitative easing, that money printing that was used after the financial crisis starts being withdrawn.
We're in such a different global economic environment now, aren't we? We're seeing rising US interest rates and the end of that cheap money that has benefited so many economies out of this region. But there was another risk that the IMF really pinpointed today. It's the trade tensions between the US and China. Kamal, how much of a factor is that in their slightly less optimistic view of the world economy?
I think that is one of their key worries. As you said, this is the second warning from the IMF in 2 days. Yesterday, they gave a very strong warning about the dangers of trade tensions, particularly between China and America. And that is certainly part of this whole debate about what they call the multilateralism is breaking down. Will there be global solutions? And if you remember, after the financial crisis, all the countries came together to fix the global economy. Their big worry is, would that happen again now?
So, Kamal, is the global financial system safer today than it was 10 years ago?
It is. To not be too pessimistic, they say that global banks are a lot safer than they were, and that is a very strong thing, and that the notion of contagion between banks is now much less obvious.
Thanks very much, Kamal Ahmed there, the BBC's economics editor. He and I will be watching all of these meetings taking place throughout the week for you on BBC World News, coming to you live from the IMF and World Bank's annual summit here in Bali.
All right, thanks for that, Karishma. Now, in other news, there are increasing expectations that China may have to devalue its currency as its trade war with the US, which you heard them just talk about, drags on. But there's a tricky path for central bank officials. They'll have to find the balance between supporting economic growth and not triggering a massive outflow of money if the yuan depreciates too quickly. The Chinese yuan is already facing pressure, and that's after China's central bank reduced the reserve requirement rate, or RRR, for the fourth time this year. This was meant to lower financing costs as well as spur growth. But this move is expected to inject over $100 billion into the Chinese economy at a time when there are worries the trade war would cause a slowdown. Well, earlier I spoke with economist Bo Zhuang and asked if China would devalue its currency and run the risk of being labelled a currency manipulator by the United States.
China is having a trade war with the US anyway, so China being a currency manipulator doesn't present China too much of downside risk. I think for the policy options, China would choose to have a passive devaluation in the next 6 to 12 months in order to actually save themselves from a severe slowdown in the next 12 months.
Right. So you're saying that they're trying to prevent the slowdown. So what does the lowering of the reserve ratio requirement for banks actually mean? Obviously, they're trying to spur growth there, but is that sort of an acknowledgement that they're losing this trade war?
Not saying that they are losing the trade war, but they definitely want to have some policy response offsetting the slowdown. Just reserve requirement ratio, just part of the bigger moves to do credit easing, fiscal stimulus to support domestic demand, making sure the growth is not collapsing.
Bo Zhuang speaking to me earlier. Now, many of us are familiar with Tesla, the electric car maker. Well, its second biggest shareholder, Baillie Gifford, has taken an interest in NIO. Now, that's a Chinese electric vehicle maker which recently listed on the New York Stock Exchange. And according to a regulatory filing, Mr. Gifford owns about an 11% stake in NIO. He's also got a 9% stake in Tesla. NIO's shares closed up 22% on that news. Now, over in Indonesia, the government has called on people who survived the Sulawesi earthquake to return to work. More than 2,000 deaths have been confirmed on the island, and around 5,000 people are still unaccounted for, with many parts of the city of Palu reduced to rubble. But more than a week after the disaster, there are signs of commerce once again. Howell Griffith has more.
Slowly, the rhythm of life is returning to Palu as its people try to find a way forward. The earthquake and tsunami tore through the city, destroying buildings, ending lives. But in its wake, the survivors need to make a living. Ardiansa says his garage has been busy. Plenty of people need their bikes repaired.
Many mechanics went back to their villages, and so only 1 or 2 mechanics were operating in the city. We decided the way to overcome the trauma was to get back to work. Everything else will follow and people will feel safe.
The first to return were the food vendors. With so many homes destroyed and aid slow to arrive, people need feeding. Tutus had to salvage her pots and pans from her damaged home before she could cook again.
I've kept the prices reasonable so that everyone can afford to buy. Many people say thank God that I've been able to reopen this store because we need food. The food in the camps is mostly instant noodles, so they say it's great that you sell this. It has proteins and vegetables.
Offices are reopening too, and so the city's workers have to prepare. Putu's barbershop is getting its first customers.
Government says that office and schools should start getting back to normal, just like before. So the students and the officials come here to make themselves presentable, to get ready to get back to normal.
It'll take 2 years to rebuild the city. The economy can't wait for that to happen. So people here in Palu are going back to work as a way of surviving. Howell Griffith, BBC News on Sulawesi.
Well, as survivors in Palu start to pick up the pieces, the government faces the enormous task of rebuilding the area. All this while also continuing with the reconstruction in Lombok after an earthquake in August there damaged the island. Reconstruction costs are bound to put a strain on the country's budget. So how will this play out for the Indonesian economy? Well, Dave Chang from Jakarta offered this analysis.
This disaster couldn't have happened at a worse time. The currency is fairly weak, so is the economy. But just like most other emerging economies, and also the current government is facing an election early next year, and with the currency being weak against the US dollars, the cost of reconstruction is expected to be fairly significant and would have quite an impact on the state budget.
And that was Dave Chang there, ending this edition of Asia Business Report. I'm Sharonjit Lail. Thanks for watching.
Hello, welcome. You're watching BBC News. Our main story is this hour. Donald Trump has accepted the resignation of his ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley. She has dismissed speculation that she's planning to run for president in 2020. Hurricane Michael is bearing down on America's Gulf Coast, bringing 100-mile-an-hour winds and life-threatening storm surges. Alabama, Florida and Georgia have all declared states of emergency. After one of the hottest summers on record, the British wine industry is now reaping the rewards with what promises to be their best ever grape harvest. There's been a steady increase in wine production in the UK over the past few years. Our correspondent John Kay reports from Devon.
On the banks of the River Dart, it is a vintage year. Today alone, they picked 6 tons of grapes on the Sharpham estate. That's 4 times more than normal. Anna's secateurs hardly stop, filling as many boxes as she can in these last few days of the season.
Between 20 and 28 crates.
A day?
A day. I'm not a very fast picker either. Some of the other guys, they do 30, 40 crates. So I've got a long way to go.
We're going to be picking these in about a week's time.
Duncan Schwab is the head winemaker on this estate.
Try one of these.
Really sweet.
You get incredible sweetness in there, incredible punchiness of flavour.
He says it's also a record year for red grapes, which they normally struggle to grow here in Devon.
We've had the perfect year. It's been absolutely fantastic. So a nice early start. We had some snow actually in April. So a lot of the bugs and diseases got killed off. The vines went very dormant. Then a wet spring, which got them all growing really well. And then from then onwards, the sun's been out. It's been just absolutely perfect.
The grapes picked here today should produce 6,000 bottles of wine. And it's a similar story this year at other UK vineyards. Even before this summer's crop, Britain's wine industry was flourishing. Just under 6 million bottles were produced here in 2017. Sales have increased by more than 30% in the last couple of years. And that is set to continue, with 1.7 million new vines due to be planted this year. But it's not just about quantity. UK producers will also have to make wines of quality at a good price if they're going to compete around the world.
Cheers.
And what if next year's weather isn't quite so perfect? John Kay, BBC News, Devon.
Oh, let's hope it is perfect, John Kay there reporting. Lots more as always on our website. I'm on social media at BBC Kasia Madeira. Mike is here at 2 o'clock with all the day's news, but now it's time for Sport Today with Tulson Tollett.
Hello there, I'm Tulson Tollett and this is Sport Today, live from the BBC Sports Centre. Coming up on this programme, 3-time winner Novak Djokovic is into the last 16 of the Shanghai Masters. Australia collapsed in the first test against Pakistan with a 33-year-old debutant taking 6 wickets. And another major honour for Brooks Koepka, who's named the PGA Tour Player of the Year. Hello there and welcome to the program where we start with tennis news, and we saw some of the big guns enter the fray at the Shanghai Masters on Tuesday. The top seeds get byes into the second round, but perhaps Dominic Thiem and Marin Cilic needed a bit more time on court because they're out. But no worries for this man here behind me, Novak Djokovic, as the world number 3 is into the last 16, as Austin Halewood reports.
Since the middle of 2018, Novak Djokovic has been a player reborn. With injuries and issues with form now well behind him, the 14-time major Grand Slam champion is back to his best. With Wimbledon and US Open titles already this season, he's on a red-hot 13-match winning streak, and Jeremy Chardy never really threatened it in China. Djokovic coming through in straight sets and a step closer to a 4th title in Shanghai.
Game, set, and match. Djokovic.
He's already qualified for the World Tour Finals in London next month too. World number 7 Dominic Thiem is one of those looking to join him there, but his hopes took a blow on Tuesday thanks to Australian Matthew Ebden. The 30-year-old is having the season of his life after 13 years on the tour. And into a third set, it got even better with his biggest win to date. Marin Cilic has reached the Tour Finals 3 times in his impressive career, but he too lost ground in the rankings on Tuesday. The world number 6 comfortably took the opening set, but was pegged back in the second by world number 48, Nicolas Jarry. Into a decider, Cilic had his chances, but 2 match points came and went, and Jarry sensed an opening. The 22-year-old Chilean with the biggest win of his career, and another seed was sent packing from Shanghai. And with the likes of Cilic and team missing out on ranking points, the path to London could be left open for players like Kyle Edmund. The British world number 14 beat Filip Krajinovic in straight sets, and after reaching the semi-finals of the China Open last week, he's hitting form at just the right time. Austin Halewood, BBC News.
On to cricket now. 33-year-old debutant Bilal Asif helped Pakistan take a massive lead of 325 into the fourth day of the first test against Australia in Dubai. They'll resume their second innings on 45 for 3 after Australia collapsed to be all out for 202 on Tuesday. They'll be going on nicely at 142 without loss, similar to Pakistan's first innings of 482. Openers Usman Khawaja and Aaron Finch reached half centuries, but only 2 other batsmen made double figures. Asif took 6 for 36, while Pakistan chose not to enforce the follow-on. And despite losing 3 wickets, they're in a strong position with 2 days remaining.
There is a pressure because in my first session, I can't bowl well. I'm not feeling well. So the guys, my teammates, support me a lot, and they give me too much confidence that you can do it. So that's it. And after this, you can see. I'm struggling for the last few years. My debut in 2015 against Zimbabwe, and after that, that is my debut in Test after coming back after 3 years. So it's been a long time.
It wasn't ideal to lose 10 for 60 odd there in the last 2 sessions of the day, but I thought the way that we fought back really well in that last 17 overs to have them 3 down. Obviously 320 is still a significant lead or deficit for us, but I thought the way that we fought back then was really positive.
Staying with cricket news, where Sri Lanka's one-day captain Dinesh Chandimal has warned that conditions will be very different for England this week. Their 5-match series begins on Wednesday with Owen Morgan's side, the #1 ranked ODI nation, ahead of next year's World Cup. Rain prevented any training for the home team in Dambulla on Tuesday morning, as you can see, and England had to train later in the evening. The match itself is a day-night game on Wednesday, and the 2 teams will play the second game of their 5-match series at the same venue.
There's always pressure being #1. People want to chase you, and it's, once you get there, I think that's when the hard work really starts, because there's a bit of a target on your back, and it's down to you to keep improving and trying to stay there. So that's a really tough challenge that brings with it its own pressures. But I think in the dressing room we have a very good understanding of what that means and what we're about as a side, and how we need to keep improving and pushing the boundaries and putting no limitations really on what we're capable of.
When you go back to 2015, when you look at the England side, they are struggled, especially during the World Cup. So that's same thing happened to us at the moment. So anyway, they changed that thing after the 2015 World Cup. So that's what we are looking at. If we can be the #1 side in the world in this series, that will be a great turning point going to the World Cup.
Now to football, and European champions, the Netherlands will play Switzerland next month for the final European place in next year's Women's World Cup. The Dutch were 2-1 winners in their second leg over Denmark, taking them through 4-1 on aggregate, while the Swiss needed the away goals rule to take them through after their home second leg finished 1-1, making it 3-3 on aggregate. The 2-legged playoff to decide who goes to France will take place on the 5th and 13th of November. Now to the men's game, and England are getting set to face Croatia on Friday and then Spain on Monday in the Nations League. Our reporter Catherine Downs was with the team at St George's Park on Tuesday.
It feels like there's been a bit of a refresh here at St George's Park. The teams in action immediately after the World Cup felt rather familiar, but there's been a good few fresh faces around on the training ground this morning as England build up for these next Nations League games against Croatia and Spain. The press out in force this morning, all the cameras pointing at a certain Jadon Sancho, 18 years old, the first player born in this millennium to be picked to represent England. A huge buzz around him and around his fellow newbies as well, James Maddison and Mason Mount. So much talk about youth here today. today. The youth of the squad, the average age of the 25-man squad, just 23 years old. Then one of the more experienced call-ups has flown somewhat under the radar today. Chelsea's Ross Barkley, who is back in the squad after more than 2.5 years since his last England cap. He's rediscovered his form after quite a serious injury, and he has the backing as well of Chelsea manager Maurizio Sarri, who says that Barkley has what it takes to go on to be a big star, both for England and for his club.
I feel like I've matured as a person. I've understood a lot, you know, how important football is, and, you know, to take little details on as I am now under my new manager. And, you know, things are going really well for me now, and I'm fully focused, you know, to keep improving and kick on.
Well, Barkley himself is only 24, but fans will be expecting a performance from him given his experience. The young stars may be grabbing the headlines, but arguably they've been given their opportunity because of injury to the likes of Dele Alli, Jesse Lingard, Loftus-Cheek, Delph. Gareth Southgate has the room now to experience with these young names. But Barkley, according to his supporters, has won his place in this squad fair and square.
On to golf now, and Brooks Koepka has been voted the PGA Tour Player of the Year. The American became the first golfer since 1989 to clinch back-to-back US Open titles. He followed that up with his third major title at the US PGA Championship, and despite rumours of a fallout after their defeat in the Ryder Cup, Dustin Johnson has been among those congratulating him on social media. The president of the IOC, Thomas Bach, has announced the 3 cities bidding to hold the Winter Olympics in 2026. The 3 on the shortlist are Calgary in Canada, Milan in Italy and Stockholm in Sweden. The announcement of the winning bid will be made in June next year, and Bach also said there will be a refugee team competing at the Summer Games in Tokyo in 2020.
We should not just then invite a refugee athlete who in an Olympic competition can be humiliated then by the performance. So there should be a certain level, because only with this certain level also the signal of hope can be sent, and the signal of awareness can be sent, the signal of hope to the refugees that despite having to suffer from being a refugee, you can achieve.
Big couple of years coming up in Japan. Of course, there's the Rugby World Cup next year, and then in 2020 it's the Olympics and the Paralympics. It's also big at the moment in the Major League Baseball because they're in the postseason. Boston are up against the New York Yankees. That's in the American League Division Series. The Red Sox lead that by 2-1. They need one more win in the Bronx, possibly at the moment, and they go through. They're currently 1-0 up at the top of the third. Till next time, it's bye-bye.
Hello, we'll start the forecast with some sunshine and end it with something quite different. But for Wednesday, the sunshine we saw on Tuesday across England and Wales extends across Northern Ireland and Scotland. Finally, we say goodbye to this rain-bearing front. However, it's all change again by the time we get to Friday. Potentially some disruptive, wet and windy weather pushing across the UK, but we'll talk about that in more detail in just a moment's time. First to Wednesday, which is going to be a fine, dry day, plenty of sunshine across the UK. There will be a little bit more cloud across northern and western Scotland first thing. It will soon thin and break. Fairly noticeable south or southeasterly breeze, so right on the south coast it may just take the edge off temperatures, but you can see how that warmth extends across England and Wales into Northern Ireland and Scotland. Temperatures widely in the high teens, low 20s Celsius, perhaps even 23 or 24 for East Anglia and southeast England. But the skies will turn hazy across southwest and southern England later in the day. Outbreaks of rain pushing their way northwards through the evening and overnight into southwest England, parts of Wales, Northern Ireland, the Midlands, northwest England, probably staying mainly dry across Scotland and the eastern side of England. Look at these temperatures. This is what you expect by day at this time of the year. A very mild night as we go into Thursday. But Thursday is going to be a transition day. We've got not one but 2 fronts working their way across the UK. The first one in the morning will bring some patchy rain through parts of northern England, perhaps East Anglia and southeast England. That will soon clear, and behind it we'll see some sunshine for a time, but look, more rain arriving into southwest England, Wales, Northern Ireland, western Scotland through the day, eventually pushing its way up into the Midlands and northwest England. Ahead of this, we've still got some warmth across East Anglia, southeast England, 21 or 22 Celsius here. Starting to see something cooler further west, and then some very turbulent weather potentially on Friday. A deep area of low pressure, tightly packed isobars, so gales and some heavy rain. We've got multiple warnings in place at the moment. That will be pushing its way across the UK, bringing heavy rain into western Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales and southwest England. Behind it, some spells of sunshine, but still very windy for Northern Ireland through the afternoon. That rain may not get across to the far southeast of England until later in the day, but it will be a windy day. These are the average sustained winds, but the gusts could well get up to 50 or 60 miles an hour, maybe even higher. So potentially some disruptive winds. Keep an eye on the warnings. There are lots of them, and they're all on our website. Bye-bye.
Inside Out reports on the stories affecting our lives.
To be a new graduate and offered that sort of opportunity is very exciting.
And explores the issues that matter.
People's lives are being affected.
From a unique perspective.
If they don't like you, one flick of the tail and they're gone.
Inside Out, Saturday at 1:30 on the BBC News Channel.
There are many movies out at the moment that are claiming to be comedies. This beats all of them. And on the one hand, it's a political tale. On the other hand, it is a magic, realist fable. It is baggy and overlong. You can either just see it as a really good popcorn adventure or as something much deeper. That's what a proper cult movie looks like. My problem with it is I wanted it to be darker. The script is laughable, but not in a good way. It's just proved so divisive. I was reminded of the friendship between Elliot and E.T. Every time anyone says mockumentary, immediately think, is it as good as Spinal Tap? The answer is no. Very smartly reinvented a franchise, and who thought that was possible? It does the thing that cinema is meant to do at its very best, to completely immerse you, to transport you, to take you to another world.
Words of Wisdom, the film review, Friday at 5:45 on the BBC News Channel.
Blue Planet 2 showed us the impact plastic is having on our oceans.
I'm travelling to all corners of the planet to try to understand the scale of the problem.
My God, just look at it. Can we turn the tide on this global catastrophe?
He's in a really bad way, really bad.
Will it ever be enough?
I feel full of feelings I didn't quite expect would be so strong.
Drowning in Plastic, available now on BBC iPlayer.
Very warm welcome to BBC News, broadcasting to our viewers in North America and around the globe. My name is Mike Embley. Our top stories. President Trump praises Nikki Haley after her shock resignation as US ambassador to the UN. But is she after his job?
We're all happy for you in one way, but we hate to lose. Hopefully you'll be coming back at some point, but you want to just, in maybe a different capacity. You can have your pick.
Hurricane Michael strengthens as it bears down on America's Gulf Coast. Forecasters warn of 3-meter storm surges and winds approaching 200 kilometers an hour. Fresh revelations about the second Russian suspect linked to the nerve agent attack in England. We travel to his home village and talk to people who know him. Turkish authorities are to search the Saudi consulate in Istanbul as the investigation into missing journalist Jamal Khashoggi gathers pace. Hello. In the past 2 years, we've had a lot of well-trailed, high-profile departures from the Trump administration. Today, there was a shock resignation. UN Ambassador Nikki Haley's exit didn't come via a tweet. Instead, she got the Oval Office treatment. He said his door was always open to her. She heaped praise on the president and, very publicly, insisted she is not considering a bid for Mr. Trump's job in 2020. The BBC's Nick Bryant starts our coverage.
Through the revolving door of the Trump administration, another shock departure. The UN ambassador Nikki Haley, by far the most high-profile woman in the cabinet.
She's done an incredible job. She's a fantastic person.
They both stressed this was an amicable separation. Donald Trump lavishing her with what for him is high praise, saying she brought more glamour to the role.
I think it's become maybe a more glamorous position than it was 2 years ago. Maybe I wonder why, but it is. Yeah, I mean, she's made it a very glamorous position.
This was far from glamorous, but showed her eye for a television moment, brandishing pictures at the Security Council of children killed in a chemical weapons attack in Syria. Many think she's a future president, but today this high-flying Republican ruled out challenging Donald Trump.
No, I'm not running for 2020. I can promise you what I'll be doing is campaigning for this one. So I look forward to supporting the president in the next election.
It's been a dizzying 24 hours of comings and goings at the White House. The new Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh paraded last night in prime time in what felt like the season finale of a reality TV show. The president confirming he's hired with a partisan blast at the Democrats.
On behalf of our nation, I want to apologize to Brett and the entire Kavanaugh family for the terrible pain and suffering you have been forced to endure. Those who step forward to serve our country deserve a fair and dignified evaluation, not a campaign of political and personal destruction based on lies and deception. And with that, I must state that you, sir, under historic scrutiny, were proven innocent. Thank you.
A normally solemn ceremony became a Republican victory rally. The party's leader in the Senate, Mitch McConnell, given a standing ovation. But with vital congressional elections now less than a month away, the politics of the Brett Kavanaugh nomination battle are by no means clear-cut. The Republicans claim they're already seeing evidence of a Brett bounce that will help them retain control of the US Senate. The Democrats claim there'll be a backlash from female voters that will help them regain control of the House of Representatives. And both are probably right.
Justice Kavanaugh.
As if to emphasize the politicization of this moment, the White House released what looked like a campaign video. But will this triumphalism hurt Donald Trump? Nick Bryant, BBC News, Washington.
Let's go live now to South Carolina's state capital, Columbia, and to Matt Moore. Matt, you were Republican Party chairman there, of course, from 2013 to 2017, worked very closely with her when she was governor. I know you're also a personal friend. What was going through her mind there, sitting in the Oval Office?
I think many of us were surprised today, as were many reviewers, no doubt. Nikki Haley is one of the most talented political leaders of this generation. She has the smile of Ronald Reagan and the steel of Margaret Thatcher. Her future is very bright. I think no one believes today's announcement is the final chapter for her. There's a lot of speculation about what comes next, but I believe she was a fantastic governor here in South Carolina, did a lot of amazing things, and was an even better, maybe UN ambassador in New York, and by all accounts, received rave reviews there during her time.
You've just given her quite a build-up there. You think she was sizing up the Oval Office? Would I like this as a place to work, was she thinking?
There's an old joke about every U.S. senator looks in the mirror and says, "Good morning, Mr. President," right? So who knows, right? It's easy to sort of ascribe aspirations to those who serve in high office. I do know from experience that she's used every chance in public service to do what she believes to be best for the people she serves. Did that at the UN, and certainly I think would be a great president and one of the front runners for when President Trump leaves office.
So why is she gone now?
Well, that's an interesting question. She came from the private sector and business. Certainly, this would be the end of her 2 terms as governor here in South Carolina, 8 years in office, really a 10-year campaign grind. It's certainly the prospect of going back to the private sector must be appealing to her. She has children and loves South Carolina, probably misses being home. But certainly it's a tumultuous time in politics, and it's a natural, I think, inflection point after the midterms of any first-term president. And now is as good a time as any.
Matt, there are suggestions that some recent appointments to the administration have rather stepped on her toes. There was also this report just recently from an anti-corruption watchdog suggesting she took, I think, 7 luxury private plane trips as gifts from business leaders, then underdeclared their value in financial disclosure reports. That was embarrassing, wasn't it?
Well, two questions there. One, obviously, I think the flights you're referring to were from personal friends here in South Carolina. Looks as though some partisan Democrats or others in Washington want to make an issue of something that many don't believe to be an issue. To your second question, Rex Tillerson was an unconventional Secretary of State, and then Ambassador Haley was an unconventional UN ambassador with a big profile as an important governor here in South Carolina. Now Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is a much more traditional Secretary of State with a more traditional chain of command. And from all accounts that I've heard in the White House, she's been an important team player for Secretary Pompeo on things like North Korea and Venezuela and the recent UN General Assembly meeting. So I think, look, there are always disagreements in White Houses with staffers or appointees who have different agendas, but Nikki Haley was the consummate team player in this White House.
Matt Moore, very interesting to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for having me.
Let's quickly round up some more of the main news for you. President Trump is saying a second meeting with Kim Jong-un is happening and that officials are working to set it up right now. He told reporters it would take place after the midterms on November the 6th. 3 or 4 locations apparently under consideration. Singapore probably not the venue again, we're told. The International Monetary Fund has warned there is a real risk of a new and widespread shock to the world economy. The IMF is saying global investors should beware of complacency over rising stock markets and warned governments to spurn nationally based policies over global solutions to inequality. Australia's government has rejected the latest report by the UN's panel on climate change, which urged countries to stop using coal by 2050 to avoid increasing global temperatures any further. The Deputy Prime Minister said coal plays an important part in energy supply and there are no plans to change that. Brazil's Social Democrat Party has said it will not openly support the left-wing presidential candidate, Fernando Haddad. That's a major upset for him. He's lagged behind the far-right candidate, Jair Bolsonaro, by 17 percentage points in Sunday's first round of voting. Hurricane Michael is speeding towards the Florida Panhandle and 120,000 people in its path have been told to get out of the way. It is currently a Category 3 storm swirling in the Gulf of Mexico. It's expected to make landfall Wednesday late afternoon. It is wide, it's moving quickly, leaving people with just hours to get out of its way. Laura Trevelyan has more on what to expect.
Hurricane Michael seen from space, a monstrous storm which is still strengthening, barreling towards the northeastern Gulf Coast of Florida. The Gillum family are heeding the warnings, taking no chances and ending their beach vacation in Panama City early.
3 kids. If it was just the adults, we would have rode it out, but, got to be safe since they're with us.
The roads are crowded with people fleeing the vulnerable coastline, and already gas is in short supply. As the authorities warn that as well as dangerous winds and up to 12 inches of rain, Hurricane Michael could bring record storm surge.
8 to 12 feet of storm surge is deadly. I cannot stress enough how dangerous this storm surge will be. And just think about it. We've seen with just tsunamis where it's just 3 feet, and that's deadly. So 8 to 12 feet is absolutely deadly.
There are states of emergency in Alabama and parts of Georgia and Florida as the region prepares for Hurricane Michael. Heavy rain is forecast for the Carolinas as the storm crawls up the east coast, possibly drenching areas still recovering from Hurricane Florence. The president says his administration is at the ready.
We are very well prepared. FEMA's ready. We're all ready. Hopefully we'll get lucky, but maybe that won't happen. But we're prepared.
Despite the warnings, not everyone is leaving town.
Our house is hurricane safe. We've got a generator. We've got plenty of water. We're good to go.
Already the storm has claimed 13 lives in Central America. The effects have already been felt in Cuba. Forecasters say this is the most serious hurricane threat to Florida's northern Gulf Coast in more than a decade, and the time to leave is now.
Laura Trevelyan reporting there, and for more on the storm and all our stories, just go to our website bbc.com/news. The Turkish president has challenged the Saudi authorities to produce the evidence that the journalist Jamal Khashoggi is safe. He left Saudi Arabia last year, fearing retribution for his criticism of the kingdom's policy. He was last seen entering the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, and there are fears he was murdered. The UK's Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt has told Riyadh Britain expects urgent answers over the disappearance. Our correspondent Mark Lowen has the latest from Istanbul.
Weeks since Jamal Khashoggi disappeared at this Saudi consulate, the Saudi authorities have given a Turkish investigative team access inside the consulate building. Now, the leaks from that Turkish investigation are that allege that Mr. Khashoggi was killed inside the consulate building by a Saudi hit squad. The focus of the investigation is looking at various black vans that left the Saudi consulate later that day. Could they have contained Mr. Khashoggi's body? And 2 Saudi planes also that flew from Istanbul back to Riyadh later that evening. There are even reports that the Saudi team could have taken CCTV footage from inside the consulate with them, and that Turkish staff working here were given a day off that day. Now, the Saudis have flatly denied the whole thing. The Saudi ambassador to the US today said that the allegations were completely false and baseless. Jeremy Hunt said he wants urgent answers from the Saudi government. This, of course, if it is confirmed, could put a lot of pressure on Western governments to give a tough response to the Saudi government. That, say critics of Riyadh, should have happened many years ago.
Mark Lowen first there. More details emerging about the second suspect in the poisoning of Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia. According to the investigative website Bellingcat, the alleged attacker's real name is Alexander Mishkin, a man who was decorated by President Putin himself. He's a doctor who worked for Russia's military intelligence service. He lives in Moscow but is originally from the remote village of Loya in the northwest of the country. From there, our correspondent Steve Rosenberg sent this.
There are some places in Russia so remote they cannot be reached by car because there are no roads. But we're lucky. The train to Archangel will pass through the village we're trying to get to. This is Loiga, population 1,000. Only in winter, when the ground freezes, can you drive here. It's emerged that one of the Salisbury suspects was born and raised in the village. His true identity has now been revealed. He's not businessman Alexander Petrov, as he'd claimed, but GRU officer Alexander Mishkin. Yes, that is Alex Mishkin, a man in the village confirms to me when I show him the suspect's photograph. According to the investigative website Bellingcat, Alexander Mishkin was born in Loiga in 1979. He went on to train as a doctor at a military medical academy in St. Petersburg, where, it's believed, he was recruited by the GRU. In 2014, he was given the Hero of Russia Award by Vladimir Putin. The British authorities do not dispute these claims. So now, the 2 men Moscow says were Salisbury tourists have both been unmasked as Russian agents. The other officer was identified last month as Anatoly Chapiga. Britain says they tried to kill Sergei and Yulia Skripal with Novichok nerve agent. They survived, but Dawn Sturgis died when she came into contact with Novichok, hidden in a perfume bottle.
This is a world away from Salisbury, which is 2,500 miles to the west, and people here are shocked that someone from this village has been accused of deploying a chemical nerve agent on the streets of Britain.
In Loiga, not only do they not believe it, some here think that Russia should strike back. I'd drop a bomb on those British, he tells me, so they'd all blow away and stop bothering Russia. Russia may feel increasingly isolated, but it's in no mood to change.
Steve Rosenberg reporting there from northwest Russia with the latest on the investigation into the Salisbury chemical attack. Do stay with us, much more to come, including this controversy over Bangladesh's plan to resettle the Rohingya refugees to an uninhabited island in the Bay of Bengal.
This was a celebration by people who were relishing their freedom. They believe everything's going to be different from now on. They think their country will be respected in the world once more, as it used to be before Slobodan Milosevic took power.
The Dalai Lama, the exiled spiritual leader of Tibet, has won this year's Nobel Peace Prize.
As the parade was reaching its climax, 2 grenades exploded, and a group of soldiers jumped from a military truck taking part in the parade and ran towards the president, firing from Kalashnikov automatic rifles.
After 437 years, the skeletal ribs of Henry VIII's tragic warship emerged. But even as divers worked to buoy her up, the Mary Rose went through another heart-stopping drama.
I want to be the people's governor. I want to represent everybody. I believe in the people of California.
Very good to have you with us on BBC News. One main headline for you this hour. Donald Trump has accepted the resignation of his ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley. She has dismissed speculation she's planning to run for president. Let's get more now from Jesse Burns, Associate Editor of The Hill in Washington, D.C. Jesse, this was quite a shock. What are your contacts telling you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think most of Washington is really still roiling from this news. This is not something that Republicans really anticipated nor want to have to deal with just 4 weeks from a major midterm election. It's really leaving a lot of Republicans scratching their heads, especially since Nikki Haley has said that she will stay on through the end of the year. Many Republicans saying, why didn't you just wait to announce this after the election at the end of the year?
So what do you think's going on?
I think it's hard to tell right now. There have been a flurry of different theories bumbling around Capitol Hill. There was an ethics investigation, a formal complaint that was launched yesterday by a group here in D.C. I think most people don't necessarily attribute her resignation to that. She had a resignation letter that she submitted to Trump last week. But the timing of this is certainly, in many Republicans' views, suspect. But I think that you're seeing, Trump, he doesn't always hold a meeting in the Oval Office, this very amicable breakup, if you will, with a top administration official, and something that he did take the time to do with Nikki Haley. The one reason she has stated for her departure is that she's been in public service for 14 years straight, and she just wants a break. We'll see if there's another major reason that maybe hasn't been reported down the road.
Just very briefly, Jesse, still, the turnover at a high level in this administration has been amazing, hasn't it?
It absolutely has. There have been dozens and dozens of top administration officials ranging in foreign policy to domestic affairs who have left this administration in the first couple of years. If Nikki Haley will be joining those people at the very highest ranks who have departed, she will be putting in the 2 years, it seems, of service as the ambassador to the United Nations. But a lot of other senior officials, Secretary of State, National Security Advisor, all of those positions have seen different faces in the first couple of years of Trump's presidency.
Jesse Burns at The Hill, thank you so much. Very good to talk to you.
Thank you.
Now, for more than 1 million Rohingya Muslims, Bangladesh was the only safe haven from the violence that drove them from their homes in Myanmar's Rakhine state. That influx of refugees, though, has created huge pressure on resources in and around Cox's Bazar. And now the Bangladeshi authorities want to ease that by relocating more than 100,000 people to a previously uninhabited island. Yogita Limai reports.
1 year ago, this was a hastily set up camp. Today, there's almost a sense of permanence here. Bit by bit, people have been rebuilding lives shattered by unimaginable horror. In its congestion and chaos, they've managed to find some peace. Now, though, many are worried about plans to send some refugees to a faraway island. Dola Banu says she doesn't want to move again. She and her family fled Myanmar in September last year.
I left everything behind, my house, my cattle, and faced a lot of hardship. Now we've just about settled down, and they are talking about moving us to that island. I'm really scared. I don't want to go there.
The government plans to move 100,000 refugees from Cox's Bazar, near the border with Myanmar, to the uninhabited island of Bhasanchar in the Bay of Bengal. It only emerged from the sea less than 20 years ago.
I've travelled about 200 kilometres from the refugee camps to the city of Chittagong. So that was a 6-hour road journey. And from this jetty by boat, it'll take about 2 or 3 hours or perhaps even more going in that direction to get to the island of Bhasanchar. Right now, the Navy's restricted access to it, so this is as far as we can get. But we've been told that work is on in full swing to prepare the island to receive a mass of people.
A Chinese company has been constructing housing for the refugees. The island is vulnerable to frequent flooding and cyclones. So, a British firm has been hired to build flood defences. Bangladesh's government has said they're also setting up cyclone shelters. Still, many aren't convinced the island is a good choice.
Bhasanchar is something that has to be investigated by independent technical experts. Is it logistically feasible to have a bunch of people on an island? How are they going to have food? How are they going to have medical supplies? How are they going to get access to humanitarian care?
But authorities are under pressure to act. Here in Cox's Bazar, there's growing resentment among locals about the influx of refugees.
We have become a minority in our own land, and the Rohingyas have become the locals. They're willing to work for cheap, so they take away all the jobs.
So far, the government has given no details of when the refugees might be moved or who might have to go. In a life full of uncertainties, this is just one more thing that's unclear. Yogita Lamai, BBC News, Cox's Bazar.
Let's just briefly round up some more of the main stories around for you. Protesters in Venezuela are accusing the government of killing an opposition lawmaker who was in custody. Authorities say Fernando Albán took his own life by jumping out of the window of the 10th floor of the intelligence agency headquarters in Caracas. He had been accused of taking part in a failed plot to kill the President Nicolas Maduro 2 months ago.